All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the broadcast. It is Monday, March 13th, 2017. Thank you very much for being with me here for another edition of the broadcast. I'm back here on air with you. We've had a rough go of it the last few months, and it's, continued into this month. It's just been... it's really big. It's been tough, and we've almost not been able to continue. That's just a fact of the matter, folks. So that's why I haven't been here. We have not came up short on our operating costs last month, and that we almost didn't have any ability to broadcast anymore. We've come in very close, and now we've got the most everything covered for the month, except one last. We have like $50 we need to cover for one last bill for the month here, and then we'll have next month to do in another couple of weeks. But anyway, fact of the matter is, we're here. I'm here with you, and we thank you very much to everybody out there who's continued to support our work and get the word out and everything else. I'm going to start having commercials here on the broadcast, not commercials before you have a goddamn heart attack, not commercials by sponsors and people like that. Although I wouldn't be opposed to it, if the right product or something came along. But I'm going to have my own commercials. And what I mean is my own commercials for my own products, because honestly, I should have been doing that a long time ago. Because when I get up here to do the show, I want to do the show. I want to talk about the information. And I can't always remember to, do stuff like, plugging my own stuff, plugging my own movies, telling people to go and buy my films, my documentary films, which is, that's what the most effort and everything goes into, the most work. It takes a year and a half to make one of these films, and I'm a one-man operation. I do every element of these films myself. And it's not easy, man. It's difficult. And it gets more and more difficult every time, especially when you're upping the ante on every level, which we're certainly doing now with Spellcaster Volume 2, which I've been working on. And, the biggest thing for any of this stuff is the money. It's not the information. We have that in spades, folks, but I'm feeling like I'm the only person fighting this fight to expose these people within the so-called, truth communities and all the rest of this stuff and all the disinformation and the psychological operations. And, it's no joke. They spend millions a year. They have spent millions, folks, against me alone. It's not a joke. Through disinformation campaigns, and every time I get a piece of work out, they have to try and downplay it or try to come out with something. It's insanity. And how little it takes us to combat them and make them have to respond to what we do here with, a few $1,000s. It's unbelievable. And that's why, that we are, I believe, doing work that is worthy of being supported and needs to be more supported in a major way. I mean, we used to on the regular, up until just a couple of years ago, we'd regularly get larger contributions, a few $1,000s here and there, a couple of times a year for the films and just to keep our work going. We don't get that anymore. I can't tell you the last time we have got an actual, large contribution in towards, the work in general and the films and everything else that wasn't related to monthly operating costs, and even that most of the time is only a few $100s. So we really need people who have the ability to be larger donors to this work to come in and put stuff forward, because I've got so many things that we're planning that are going to be happening this year, coinciding with the 10th anniversary of this broadcast in September. And there's a lot of stuff I can't tell you about right now, but there's a lot of new stuff in the works for me and what we're doing here. So again, I can't tell too much about it yet, but the immediate goal right now is to just keep our operating costs being able to be funded every month, and getting the rest of what we need to finish the current projects that we have started. I have two or three I have like two film projects that are started and one that's on the burner to be started and hopefully finished by the end of this year. But again, if those fundraising goals don't get met, then those things get pushed back farther, and it sets us back as far as the timelines we have, because I'm trying to get more achieved here in a smaller amount of time than we have in the past. Getting out more films, my plan was to get out, as ambitious as it sounds, but my goal for this year is to get out Spellcasters 2 by, the summer, July, somewhere there, and then have another film out, finished and out by the end of the year, by Christmas. But again, all those things are dependent on whether or not we get our funding and everything. We don't have far to go on our Spellcasters Volume 2. I mean, we had to up the budget on this thing, and probably we'll have to up the budget some more. I mean, it started out it was a pretty small budget, but this thing's ballooning into I don't know how long of a film. It may end up being two more films. It may be 2 and 3. I may have to do it like that. I don't know. Because as as I've talked about many times on the show, it's always an embarrassment of information in a just a fucking, cornucopia and overabundance of information every time. And usually with every film, there is always that wrangling in and stuff. But with this film, it's not possible to do that. I got so much stuff that connects across all these different people that I almost have to make like 4 or 5 separate films on 4 or 5 separate subjects, all within the context of one film. It's just turning into a much more daunting thing than I thought it was going to be. And I guess I always say that, but this one really, honestly, more than any of the other ones, has just turned into. I mean, there's so much data and so much information, and I can't leave a lot of it out because it was Spellcasters. There was stuff that didn't go in there that I wish could have been in there, but made sense to cut it because it just, went too far into other areas and stuff. So sometimes those things make sense. But with this, there's so many things that connect, especially with all this, the musical stuff. And then where do you start? And, how do you sequence? That was the hardest thing. And that's why Spellcasters 1 took so long because, I could have just thrown that movie together and had it out a year before it came out. But, it wouldn't have been what it is. And each successive film gets better and better, and everybody always, there's a reason why you hear not just me, but other people say, every time they come out with something new, you hear bands do this. Every time they come out with something new, it's the fucking greatest thing they've ever done. And that's not always the case with me, but it has progressively become that way and started that way with, I think, with Lost Secrets of Ancient America Volume 1. It's just progressively gotten better since then. But this one is just, as you heard me talk a lot about in some of the last broadcasts, there's so much information and stuff. So we got some various things here we'll get into and talk about here with you on the show. But I'm going to have some commercials for Let There Be Rocks. I'm going to have a commercial for the films, a separate one for the films, a separate one that tells people how they can contribute and subscribe and all this. Because, I mean, there's all these things and it's only going to become more and more. And it's just difficult for me to get up here and spend every day. I have to get up here and remind people. Because seriously, if I don't remind people, you think it's silly, but it's not. These are lessons I've learned after 10 years of doing this. You have to constantly remind people, to contribute or buy your films or subscribe. If you don't, then people don't do it. And because I'm always been so focused on the information, and I'm a terrible self-promoter, I have to, I've got to figure out another way to do this. So that's what I'm going to start doing, is just having little spots like that I'll make, and I'll insert them into the broadcasts or whatever. I don't even know why I'm telling you this. It's one of those things I should just do and I'm not asking for permission anyway, because I do what the fuck I want here. But I'm just letting you know that when you start hearing those, that's what's coming. That way I spend less time fucking telling people to do, and that stuff will be there, and then I don't have to remind people every time. Because, you get new listeners in all the time. There's so many things I have to constantly find myself repeating, because new people come in, and then it's like coming in on the middle of a conversation. That's the problem with my show. That's always been the problem. Because every time a new person comes in, it's like walking in on the middle of a conversation. You don't know what the fuck's going on with it. You're like, what? What are you guys talking about? And people are telling the story like frustrated. They're like, oh, whatever. I'll tell you later. That's oftentimes what happens. People walk in on the middle of the conversation. So anyway, I've got lots of stuff. We got lots of stuff planned for this year. Still update on the DVDs and Blu-rays for Spellcasters Volume 1. Again, you'll know something as soon as I know something. It's just a big waiting game. I've continually been able to wait. We've had major problems with artists and getting the artwork done. And the guy who has been working on it has had he had a backlog, then he had personal issues and all this stuff. So he's had to move. So we're waiting. He's saying now, he's been saying this for 2 months, but now he's saying it's going to be about a week or so and it should be ready. But again, I'll believe it once I see it. But anyway, once that's done, and we'll send those off to manufacturing, they'll start going out after that. You can, again, get a subscription to the archives. You can donate at my website. Use the donate button there. The operating cost thing. I'm just going to start having weekly goals that we need to meet each week, aside from the monthly operating costs and stuff like that. Each week we'll have our usual fundraising week, but then each additional week when we have shows, we'll have a small goal that we need to meet each week. Probably generally somewhere between $100 $200 at the most. And it won't be every week, but we'll have 1 week it may be 50, whatever it may be. But we'll have certain goals, because the problem is that oftentimes when when you're working on a film or something, you have the budget and you have initial budget, and you can say, all right, well, it'll cost this much to make it and put it out, but then you also have things that pop up during the course of making the film, and I need this piece of footage. Well, guess what? That because this happens, you wouldn't believe how many times this happens. Sometimes, there'll be like a piece of footage that I need, and the only fucking place you can get this fucking piece of footage to buy some box set that costs $500. So, it's ridiculous. But of course, that lets you know also when that happens, when you consider everything else that's out there, when you find something like that, that also lets you know, oh, well, okay, this further confirms what I'm onto here. I don't want to tell you about it, but there's a specific piece of information that I've been searching for quite. It's a video clip. I've seen it 100 times because it was on a show I watched a lot when I was younger. So it's been out there for years, and it used to be on the internet, but of course now it's one of those pieces of information that's been scrubbed from the internet, and it's not even available in YouTube, box set formats, licensing, anything. So it's those kind of things that pop up. But anyway, we're just going to start having weekly goals. So each week, okay, for this week, our weekly goal for this week, $200. That's what we want to raise this week. That's our goal. And we'll have, once we reach that, the earlier in the week that we reach that goal, the better it will be. Because then we know we've reached that goal for the week, and we can we know we'll at least be able to operate and do our work with no problems that week. Boom, there we go. And so on and so forth. If we don't reach these goals that we need to reach in a timely manner, then there won't be shows. That's just the way it is. The Patreon model is kind of doing that now. People are doing that with Patreon, which I've thought about doing as well. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't, it's been my own fault. But for the past 10 years, regardless of whether or not we reach goals, I keep producing content, yet we're not getting even the minimal amounts that we need to continue and do our work. So in order for that to happen now, I'm just will not be producing any new content if we aren't reaching our goals. And again, there's so many people out there that want the information because they know that they're going to get stuff from me. They're not going to get anywhere else, but yet that's all they want. They just want the information. They don't give a fuck if I'm able to continue to do this work. They just expect they're entitled, believe they are entitled for me to have sacrificed everything in my life and put my life on the line literally multiple times and sacrificed everything in the world to do this. And they can just take. I'm just not going to satisfy those people anymore. So that's why we were not going to be putting, as many full shows. I'm going to be doing some different shows, some different stuff that doesn't have anything to do with conspiracies and this type of stuff, and be putting it out there. I've talked about that for a long time. I'm going to continue and keep doing that and do that more. I haven't done as much as I want to because I just need to do something else besides just this stuff all the time. I need some kind of outlet because I have interests beyond this stuff. One of them is a new series I'll be doing. I'm not sure if it's going to be it'll be a separate show. It'll be like, I don't know if it's going to be a podcast type thing yet or a pay per episode type thing yet, where you pay $5 or whatever for an episode. I'm not real sure yet what it's going to be, but I'll let you know real soon. And it's going to be enjoyable. And it's going to start out, I think we're going to start out doing it without giving too much away about what this is, around my films, and then we'll move on and go into other films and stuff later. But anyway, it's this cool new concept that I've come up with, and we're going to be doing some shows and test shows and stuff. But I don't know whether it's going to be. I thought I might just do it as just like a separate podcast type thing. Is there a limit? I don't even know anything because I don't do. People call themselves podcasters. I've never called myself a podcaster because I've been doing this longer than podcasting's been around. And when I started out, it was all internet stream, shoutcast streams, and I was on shortwave and AM radio stations, FM, 100,000 watt flamethrowers. I mean, at one time, the Global Reality was on like 42 stations. So for about a couple of years, until I couldn't play that fucking. It just seemed unreasonable, and still does seem unreasonable to me, unless you're, willfully entering into that world. Somebody was going to be a host for like Coast to Coast AM or something like that. If you go and be a host for them and then complain about them not letting you talk about what you want to talk about, the sponsors, I have no sympathy or pity for you. It's like, come on, dude. You don't go, you try and get that job, not know what the fuck that's about. They're going to let you talk about what you want to talk about. They're certainly going to interrupt you every 2 minutes with commercials and sponsors and the rest, and milking fucking snake oil ads and the rest of it. But what I mean is, especially at the time, I was just not interested in restricting my work and my output, to appease radio stations and sponsors, and not being able to, drop an F-bomb when I want to, or say. That was the big thing, getting into this stuff to be, and that really was when I started to see a lot of the infiltrators and people that were operators and stuff, because it's that same old classic thing, This is supposed to be about breaking away from the confines and the constructs of the societal norms that put us in a environment where we're now having our total beings, our total selves be attacked, and individuality is now in the crosshairs. So you want me to take this, subversive content and information and then sanitize it again so it'll be more acceptable for mainstream audiences? Are you fucking kidding me? It's ridiculous. The whole idea of that is ridiculous. But of course, now once you find out, especially when you find out about these phony networks and they're, like we talked about with Cash Yogi and all that stuff, and finding all these fronts, that's basically what they are. They're CIA money laundering front. They basically take the sales of these miracle cream products and the rest of this stuff and whatever it is, snake oil, and that's how they, they sell it to the public, and then that money's laundered cleanly through the front of selling these miracle creams and whatnot. And Ed and Cassiogi totally created this entire model that all of the Patriot networks followed lock, stock, and barrel 100%. So this became the model. I'll tell you what, when I first started on air, I was on a little network, and my sister had done some work for this network. Then I started out on getting them sponsors and advertisers and stuff, and she'd get a little bit of money for every time she hooked one up. And so back then, pretty much what everybody was doing, because there wasn't any other reference point, everybody was going. And this is long, this is before I was even had my own show or had done any work on the Council for National Policy or Secret Right or any of that. And so everybody back then was basically just going and finding whatever sponsors Alex Jones had and calling them up and trying to get sponsors from them. And this network that I went on to be on at the time only had they had a few hosts, but none of the guys were doing shows on there at the time. Were saying or anything negative at all towards Alex Jones or any of that. And on the contrary, they were all pro all of those people and very much for them. It wasn't until I started my show there many months later that, had Peter Dale Scott on, started talking about the Council for National Policy, and I started my quest and finding all that stuff, started talking about it incessantly. But even before that, my sister would call these sponsors to try and get for this network that I eventually came on, and she had some interesting stories about, like, some of them. She said there was 2 or 3 of them. Again, put this in the context of not knowing anything at the time, or not even really suspecting anything at the time about, Alex Jones and GCN or any Ed and Cassiogi stuff, or any of these fronts for CIA, Black Op funding and laundering the money through the sale of these products that Cassiogi invented, all that. But I remember her saying that, like, there was one or two of these sponsors that she called, and one of them said, "No, we're not going to, no, we won't work with you, or we won't sponsor you. We've been warned about you." And she was like, "Hey, I contacted this such and such sponsors. Was one of Alex Jones's sponsors at that time. I don't think it is anymore. I can't remember what product it was, but one of them actually said to her, 'No, we've been warned about you.'" And that was interesting because, again, at that time, nobody on that network at the time that was there. It's a defunct network, long defunct network now. But there was nobody there that was saying anything at all negative. And it made me, in hindsight, it made me think back to that story I tell in the Spellcasters, and the story I've told about that thing I had with Alex Jones, and getting this feeling now, looking back on that, like he knew somehow that, in the future I was going to be exposing him and doing all this stuff. And which, of course, once you study Scientology, now it makes total sense. We'll talk more about that here in a bit in regards to Jones and Donald Trump as well. But to preface that, that's one of the things I didn't know about until I started this research into the Spellcasters films and into Scientology. Once you get up into the upper realms, and this is why I've in the film, and why I think it's important for people to understand the connection between not only the MK Ultra program, but other behavioral modification programs, psychological warfare operations, remote viewing. I think it's very important that people understand why they need to be informed about why these things all connect together. Because these techniques are being used upon you, ladies and gentlemen, by people like Alex Jones and Donald Trump and the rest right now, today, even as we speak. And again, I've talked about, this stuff that people always say is coincidences, like the 2 main Alex Jones websites. There's still people out there that'll tell you it's just a coincidence. that info wars came from information. The term information warfare, info wars, first used in the Paul Vallely and Michael Aquino mind war documents on conducting psychological warfare against the people of the United States by convincing them there was an outside threat to their freedom and to their country that they and to their religion, Christianity, that they have to all band together against in a big grassroots movement to defeat, with this leader figurehead, Alex Jones type figure at the helm. But really, the whole mind war of it is convincing them that they're fighting this outside threat, when in reality what they're doing is allowing the threat that they're so scared of to actually gain control and defeat them. All the while it's going on, and while the clamps are going closer, they're thinking they're fighting for their freedom, which is, in a nutshell, this is exactly to a T, ladies and gentlemen, what I've been warning everyone about Alex Jones, the Council for National Policy, and the rest of this stuff the last 10 years. This is what I have been on about. This is it right here in a nutshell. So he took information warfare from the mind war documentation, and then Prison Planet. That term was coined. It was 100% verified and connected and coined to L. Ron Hubbard, which, by the way, today, March 13th, is, if you didn't know, it's my cat's birthday, but it's also the most revered day in all of Scientology. It's like Christmas, New Year's, Kwanzaa, fucking Hanukkah, all wrapped up into one for Scientologists. I mean, this is the day they drink it up, celebrate, get down. This is the birthday of L. Ron Hubbard. And that's no joke. It is considered, that's not a joke, that's not a lie, that's Scientologists' own words. It is the most revered day. March 13th is the most revered day in all Scientology. And the term Prison Planet, coined by L. Ron Hubbard, was first coined and first used specifically in OT level 3 of Scientology. Now, doing the math on that and going back and looking at different Alex Jones stuff, that means I think he started that website in the, late 90s, maybe 96, 97, somewhere in there. Maybe older than that. But that means at least up until 96, 97, he was OT level 3. There's no telling what. They say eventually once you get to the highest OT levels that you gain all these powers. And I think a lot of people have been skeptical and saying, oh, that's just a bunch of hogwash. Or is it? Because I don't think, I think a lot of it isn't hogwash. I think there's actually something to it. This whole idea of MEST, M-E-S-T, that Scientology talks about, matter, energy, space, time, and how once you reach the upper levels, you're able to open your mind and basically manipulate these things, or, kind of like psychic abilities. I mean, advanced psychic abilities. When you look at what Stubblebine and the Remote Viewing Project, Project Stargate, Aquino, all of this stuff, the ties to admitted psychological warfare operations, that's what all of that stuff was. That Stubblebine and Aquino and all those guys worked on was all massive psychological operations, military psychological warfare operations. When you look at that and combine that with the creation of these things going on at the same time that Scientology was coming up through the ranks, then you start to understand these things and these statements that these people make that, again, people write off. It's a very, very talked about thing in the upper levels of Scientology, this ability to be able to have, to be able to see the future and see beyond past, present, future, and see all things happening simultaneously. So to have those couple of incidences like that, specifically the thing with Jones, and just because, again, that thing I had where he was like, I've told the story a million times, and I just never feel like I've ever gotten it across. I mean, it was literally like I was looking at, you remember in Ghostbusters when they turned fucking Sigourney Weaver and Rick Moranis into those demon dogs, goes to the Gozerian, and there's that one shot where they do a close up of the animatronic dog, and it like swings its head around, and like where it's just like it's like looking dead at you, dead in the eyes, and all right, it's like rah. That's I know as cheesy as that seems, that and that's what it seemed. That's exactly what I can relate that. I mean, it was like a demon was staring through me, and now knowing about the thetans, and that's what the OT levels are, operating thetans. And each level, just like in Freemasonry, that's the other interesting correlation. And I discovered this many, many years ago in my research into Freemasonry, long before I knew anything about Scientology, is that each successive level in Freemasonry slowly opens up your subconscious. And that by the time you end up reaching the upper levels of Freemasonry, you probably appear, and do appear actually, except probably in some certain cases, and even to yourself, you probably don't notice anything different. But these successive levels, as you go up higher and higher and higher, slowly each one, that's why there's so much pomp and circumstance and ritual involved in each level of ascending up the ranks of Freemasonry, and also in Scientology as well. But each successive level, specifically in Freemasonry, opens up your subconscious, opens up that part of your soul that allows entities to come in and control you. And supposedly by the time you get to the 32nd degree of Freemasonry, which again is the highest level, people all the time always write me, so-and-so's a 33rd degree Freemason. No, you mean they were a 32nd degree. 33rd degree is an honorary degree. Someone who is an actual Mason goes up the ranks. 32 degrees is the highest rank because you have to go through each one to get to it. You can't hop, skip, and jump from the Blue Lodge levels, which are the first three levels and degrees of Freemasonry. You can't hop, skip from that up to 33. Unless you see, 33s are honorary degrees. They're usually given to people who have done, like Manly P. Hall. Manly P. Hall was not a Freemason either. But he traveled the world and gained all this knowledge and found out information, just like I've done. I'm not a Freemason either, but I've found out information about Freemasons. I've done research into where they trace back to and stuff. And so that's why I've had Freemasons tell me not just once or twice, multiple times. I've had Freemasons tell me that I know more about the craft than 90% of the people that are they're members of Freemasonry today. That same reason. So they give these honorary degrees, but the 32nd degree is the highest. But once you get through to that highest 32nd degree level, and you've gone through all the steps in there, you're supposedly at that point fully controlled, and you have an entity basically working and operating through you at all times. And Scientology seems to have taken that same model, but figured out a way to make it even more darker and demonic. That's why. And again, I'm not saying the Freemasons are working in the light, and I'm not necessarily saying they aren't either. But my point is, it appears that this system, this device system, which of course, when you trace it back and research it back, it goes back to the Pythagorean mystery religions, the Babylonian mystery schools, the Egyptian mystery schools, back and back and back. And it appears, at least from my research, that these schools didn't even originate here on Earth. They've existed in other realms and other realms and other planes and planets, and is, far older than even our Earth. But it definitely appears that whatever this model is, because it seems to be almost a model where a lot of things are very similar, but certain things can be changed, because the Mormons also have a similar system. This is why they've been freaking out so much recently. I haven't really followed a lot of this. I've read a little bit of it, but this is, if you've heard about the Mormon leaks thing, this is why the Mormons are freaking the fuck out worse than, I thought that was hilarious. The Mormons are freaking the fuck out worse than the CIA is about leaks. All this new Julian Assange stuff comes out. Again, it's just more horse shit, telling us stuff we already know. They claim to have the same old bullshit because this is all a controlled CIA thing. they claim to have all this information and all this secret shit, but they've yet to even reveal anything to us that we didn't know. Even the most recent stuff that the media was trying to sensationalize, and you and me and the rest of us that have been talking about this stuff and reading about this stuff for years, sitting here, we're going over here. Yeah, yesterday's conspiracy theories, today's accepted fact, yet again. But that's why the Mormons are freaking out, because their levels of Freemasonry and the levels of Mormonism are same thing with Scientology. They're pretty much one and the same. And it's interesting because Mormonism came to rise and rose to prominence and established itself as a religion single-handedly only because of Freemasonry being outlawed in the United States at the time in which Brigham Young, Joseph Smith, and founded the Mormon religion. It was set up, this is a fact, it was set up originally as a front or a religion to be able to practice Freemasonry in secret. And this is why there's so many things from the stuff about the giants and the mounds, and Joseph Smith found these plates, allegedly he found these in a mound. There's so many things that people have kind of written off about Mormonism and said, oh, it's hokey and bullshit, and they make fun of it. Yet, there's a lot of stuff in there that's more factually recognized in what the Mormons believe than in any other religion. Specifically with the stuff with the dark hair, the red haired giant, stuff I cover in Lost Secrets Volume 1. But I had told people about Freemasonry that were Mormons, and they were just freaking out, people I worked with and stuff. And one of them actually showed me this book. He told me it was like off limits. People who weren't Mormons weren't even supposed to see this. And he showed me this book, and, it was like, degrees and levels, just like Freemasonry. So I believe from my research, that's why you've had all these different groups with different names, whether they be the Brotherhood of the Serpent or Brotherhood of the Snake or Pythagorean mystery, religion, mystery schools. Pythagoras, that name Pythagoras literally means I am the Python. And he taught all his students from behind a curtain. And you had to go through this entire, you had to do this where you couldn't speak for months and months. If you spoke, you were out. And after you went through all the degrees, they would pull back the curtain. It was like, pulling back the curtain on Oz, and he would reveal himself. Like I don't know, was he? I think he was an actual fucking snake. That's what I think. That's where I'm putting my money at. That's what I've thought for years. Because why so much secrecy? Why so much intrigue? You got to go through this motherfucker's school and be taught with him behind a curtain for a fucking year or whatever, and then once you go through it, then you get to see him. That's fucked up. But yeah, all of these different groups, Illuminati fraternities, all the rest of them. When you start to see these correlations between Freemasonry, Scientology, Mormonism, you see the levels and degrees and the information that they contain that points in the direction of this slow control that happens once you ascend up the ranks. That's when the realization that it's possible to be able to have this sort of I don't know what would you call it, a compartmentalized organization, or a compartmentalized religion, or something, whatever it may be, something where it has degrees and levels that you have to ascend to. And we see it being put to use for the bad, but once you start to understand that this model can be changed and moved around for different uses, that makes you also understand that at some point, someone may have, could have, or should have, or maybe they will, created an alternate system of this, which allows, instead of demonic entities to be controlling you, working through you, for, angelic or whatever they may be, benevolent beings to work through you. Maybe this is why the Pleiadians, that are light beings, always seem to make appearances and be seen on Earth when great cataclysms are coming. Maybe that kind of thing. I don't know. But I do know that these systems that are different but really the same and have a lot of different correlations, and seeing how the knowledge of that and the research into secret societies by whatever operators were in the OSS, like L. Ron Hubbard and CIA later. And of course, prior to the end of World War II, when you had the Nazis who were doing the same stuff, when they were coming up with these, they were using black magic techniques that, they were doing massive black sun rituals at Wewelsburg Castle there in Germany, and they were taking these black magic techniques and they were incorporating them into their tests with lysergic acid, diethylamide, LSD, and their attempt to create robotically controlled, mind-controlled soldiers, which then we completely stripped mined lock, stock, and barrel and brought over the top scientists over during Paperclip and created what later became the MK Ultra program and the remote viewing program based on those same principles. So it all makes so much more sense to me now that this experience that I had, with the Alex Jones thing and him, I'm just so glad that now, even though it's taken over 10 years, I fully understand what that whole thing was about now. That's what this thing does to you. And, you eventually become a wholly controlled entity once you ascend up to the highest ranks of Scientology. So I don't know how I found this or where I stumbled across this at. And I believe I had seen it last year around the time I was coming out with the Spellcasters Volume 1. I believe I had seen it somewhere around then. I don't know. No, it wasn't back. It wasn't that far back. I guess it was towards the end of 2016. I don't know. It seems like I saw this somewhere and I didn't cover it on the show. I don't know. I don't remember how I came across this again recently, but I saw this. And because I've talked about this before, when you learn new stuff and you assimilate new information, you then see things you've already seen a million times. Sometimes they can look differently to you, completely different, because you're filtering them through a different lens. And I'm constantly having to do that because I'm constantly, my belief systems and my understanding of this stuff changes literally every day because I'm researching every single day. And every day there's so many new pieces of information. But this really sums up what I've been talking about. And again, if you haven't seen my latest film, The Spellcasters Volume 1, for more context about what I'm talking about here, we'll be talking about, I highly suggest you go and get a download of that from our download shop right now and watch that film, so you can have a better understanding of this stuff that I've been talking about with Scientology and Trump and Alex Jones and the rest. God, this was such an aha moment when I read this. Alex Jones marvels at how Trump finishes his sentences during their private conversations. Quote, "The guy's reading my mind." Now, this is fascinating, especially when you look at one of the big things that I need to go back and do. Maybe I should do that before the artwork's done so I can shoehorn it into Spellcaster before the DVDs get printed. I feel like I really need to make either a separate video or shoehorn it into the DVD before it goes out of Spellcast, something. But I did one show on it, but I don't feel that was sufficient because the shows just, they come out and then they go and they get lost in the mix. And unless little separate videos are made with individual topics, sometimes stuff gets lost. And that's why I have to repeat myself. One of the things I need to do a separate little feature on are free zoners, and what is also known as the free zone. I did not know about this free zone at the time of which when I made the film, and only found out about it a month or two after the film was already done and out. But it answers so many questions as to why there appear to be people that appear to be Scientologists, but yet aren't officially called Scientologists and aren't officially considered in the church, but yet they have every indication about them that they would be a Scientologist. And that's when I found out about this thing called the free zone. It's called the free zone, or also known as, the people in it are also known as free zoners. And you can look this up and verify it for yourself. And I had wondered how accepting or recognizing of the free zone Scientology that they were. And I was shocked to find out that the actual, this is the term free zone was originally only used by a single organization, but the term is now commonly applied to all non-Church of Scientology Scientologists. Now, see that alone right there. That right there verifies what a lot of people don't know and what Scientology themselves don't openly advertise that exists. You can be a Scientologist and not be a member of the Church of Scientology. This is a very important distinction, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to get out to people in a large way. I feel it's very, very important for people to understand this, because I didn't understand it either, because, again, they want you to not understand. Again, it says it right there. The term is now commonly applied to all non-COS Scientologists, which means all non-Church of Scientology Scientologists, which means, tells us we already know, you can be a Scientologist and not be a member of the Church of Scientology. And the information that I put in the Spellcasters film about Louis Farrakhan. And, Louis Farrakhan goes on Alex Jones' show and promotes Trump and says all this crazy shit. And, I'm voting for Trump. And I'm talking to Alex Jones. That seemed odd, didn't it? And black folks should go out and kill police officers. And then like 2 weeks later, it happens here in Dallas. Then Farrakhan's up there talking about doing auditing, and he literally says in the video clip of my film that demons came out of him when he did auditing. And then there's the clip of Mike Rinder in the Leo Ramini show, I think it was the last episode they had, where they bring up the Farrakhan thing. And even Mike Rinder, you're talking about the guy who was, second in command to Miscavige for many, many years, the big enforcer, himself says, well, I don't know how that's going to work, because Scientology is not interchangeable with other religions. You either have to be Scientologist or not. And I saw that and I'm like, okay, well, right there, he's either, and are you going to literally try to make me believe that Mike Rinder, second in command in Scientology for many years under Miscavige, knows nothing about free zone Scientology? But with his statements, he tried to make it appear that Louis Farrakhan couldn't, and Louis Farrakhan literally, like I think he brought the whole church of, he's now brought the Nation of Islam under Scientology into the free zone. But because so many people don't know about this, and again, here's what's interesting. The term free zone was originally only used by a single organization, but is now commonly applied to all non-Church of Scientology Scientologists. Again, that's huge in and of itself. That is the verification that we have known that people will try to dispute you on, and the way they try to get around having gone through auditing processes, but being able to say and not be pinned down to being associated with Scientology. This is what they've used it for now, so that they can gain what they believe is the power of these thetans to work through them without having the guilt by association attached to them from the actual Church of Scientology members. Again, that is a distinction that most people are not making. There are Scientologists and there are Church of Scientologists, but they are two different, distinct things. Now, listen to this. Although many dispute the application of the term to themselves, the International Free Zone Association, the group whose name became adopted as a generic term for independent Scientology, was not the first independent Scientologist group. The California Association of Dianetic Auditors, the oldest breakaway group still in existence, claims a founding date of December 1950, predating the Church of Scientology itself. So these free zoners, and when you go and look at who some of the earliest guys who went through the highest OT levels were, this is crazy. This is another, I didn't even have time to even document all of these in the film either. All the top guys of the NSA, all the top guys in the national security apparatus for the United States government were some of the very first people to reach the highest levels of Freemasonry, even though one of L. Ron Hubbard's main tenets was that government officials couldn't go through the auditing process. So you see that so many of these rules and so-called things of Scientology, they're in selective enforcement. Now, of course, if you're Joe Blow nobody and you're, some fucking paper pusher at some government agency, okay, they're probably not going to say no, but these guys who are at the upper levels, why is it that all these guys at the upper levels, see, that's one of the things you start to realize. There is almost like what do you call it? An aristocratic sort of, I don't know what the term is I'm looking for here. You know how people want to make millions and millions of dollars so they can buy, the top of the top end cars, Bentleys and fucking, I'm not talking about fucking Mercedes and bullshit. I'm talking about top end shit. It really seems that that's something that's been understood for quite some time now, is that people are in some of these upper echelons of the government and others have now, and of course with Farrakhan too, are now believing that the technology and the auditing used by Scientology gives them an advantage, and some kind of very, very high level advantage that's very sought after. And so this is why they've been able to create, and this has been their goal. I speculated about this before even finding out that was actually their plan. I speculated that my belief from the research is they want to use this technology. They want to unleash it on everybody. And that's why the continued attempts to take over media, music, TV, and everything else, that's their goal. They want to unleash, and they want to unleash this technology and use it on everyone. So when you start to see now that you have these breakaway groups, it says a new November 2004 press release was published by the International Free Zone Association, cited what it says was a command written by L. Ron Hubbard himself. Quote, "Before you go, whisper this to your sons and their sons. The work was free, so keep it so." Free zone. So this is a very key thing to understand, that someone can be a Freemason. I'm sorry, I'm not a Freemason. Someone can be a Scientologist and have gone through the auditing sessions and be highly connected to these individuals without being an actual card-carrying member of the church. Okay, this needs to be established and understood. Because as I talk about in the Spellcasters, you have this going on, I think, not only with Farrakhan, but with Alex Jones, Jim Mars, Donald Trump, who knows how many other people. Charlie Sheen, most definitely. Remember recently when I talked about that 9/11 that 9/11 thing for the that used the L. Ron Hubbard treatment? It was the only charity Donald Trump gave to. I found the other interesting thing about that. The person who co-hosted that with Jenna Elfman was Charlie Sheen. I found another interesting thing about that. There was a list of the people, high-level people that donated to, and of course, most of them were Scientologists. It was Leah Remini, Tom Cruise, because it was his whole thing, Donald Trump, and Paul McCartney. And I just went, boom! There's the big fucking circle around. See, all this stuff connects together, folks. Everything I've been telling you about, continue to tell about, it all connects together. So, again, free zoners, this idea, the ability to be a Scientologist without going through, it's almost like the honorary 33rd degree of Freemasonry. I find that very similar. Because you get these people who, they'll say so-and-so is a Freemason, or they'll say so-and-so is a 33rd degree Freemason. Well, yes, but not technically. Because technically you aren't a Freemason unless you go through all of the degrees. But someone can still be called a 33rd degree Freemason and be considered a Freemason by people, even though they just got this honorary degree. So it's very similar. But listen to this. This is going back to the thing about Jones, where he says, he's saying Trump finishes his sentences and in their private conversations, he's reading his mind. Now, that blew me away, because that's exactly what you supposedly get when you go through these higher levels of the OT levels, especially if you're associating and being around someone who's also gone through those levels. And that also relates to Freemasonry. That's what a lot of the grips, a lot of the hand grips and the handshakes within Freemasonry itself are all about creating. And this is something, again, I found out on my own or experiencing it. They are about creating it's basically like an electrical union. It's like your electrical energy that goes through your body from your body system. When you do these grips, these handshake grips, the Masonic grips, it creates basically a bond and a union between the two people's electrical systems, which then enables a bridge that enables telepathic communication to be to work. Go and search the internet and see how many other fucking people who've done radio shows or YouTube videos. What you go and search how many other motherfuckers will ever tell you that and know about that. None. You won't find it. You know why? Because they don't know it. I know it. Why do I know it? Because I experienced it. When I went to the Guthrie Lodge in 2009 in Oklahoma City, it's right outside Oklahoma City. I've talked about it before. There's pictures and stuff in it in some of my films. But yeah, in that lodge, this guy, was taking us through. He was the tour guide, because a lot of these Masonic lodges don't let you go. If you ever get a chance to go to Guthrie, Oklahoma, go to Guthrie, Oklahoma. Don't go during the summertime, because it's an old building. They don't have this is the perfect time of year to go right now. Between now and we went in June, and I guess it still wasn't too bad yet, but it's an amazing building. They filmed scenes from the movie Rain Man there with Tom Cruise. And scenes in the movie you think of the White House is actually this fucking Masonic Lodge in Guthrie. It's actually bigger than the White House, is how big this building is. But it's got, it's got the usual Masonic and Babylonian and Assyrian. I mean, that was, one of the things I wanted to see there. but we're going through the tour, and I'm just constantly pointing out stuff that he's not pointing out. Like there's a symbol on the ground, and somebody on the tour goes, "Oh, hey, what's that?" And he just goes, "Oh, that's just a symbol for, one of the words for the name of God, Yahweh." I go, "That's the Tetragrammaton." You could hear I just blurted out. You could just hear my voice like echoing through the halls of this place, and everybody just got dead silent when I said that. Mason guy looks at me and goes, "Yeah, he's exactly right. Okay, follow me." Well, I'm exactly right, motherfucker. How come you didn't say that? You know what I mean? Telling somebody that's just Yahweh, a symbol for Yahweh, and tell them you're going to explain to them what the Tetragrammaton is. I mean, so anyway, I'll get to talk through the whole tour. We had talked to this guy. I just kept pointing out stuff like that, and he walked by me. You're not. Are you a Mason? I'm like, nope, sure, nope, not, nope. Don't plan on ever being one either. A few times he said it. He said to me like 4 or 5 times, "You're not a Mason, huh? You're not one." Nope. "Oh, you ought to be. You ought to be." He said it to me a couple of times. So we went through the tour, and they had like a little gift shop and stuff, and everybody else was kind of filtering out, and I saw the guy, and I said, "Hey, I'm just curious." I'm like, "Don't you guys have?" I saw it online. "Don't you guys have an Assyrian room here?" And I was really wanting to see this Assyrian room because that fascinated me. I was just curious, He was like, "Yeah, we do, but it's under construction right now, so it's closed. You can't see." I'm like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Why are you so fascinated with the Assyrian room?" I said, "Well, I'm just fascinated why the Freemasons would have an entire room in this giant, massive lodge dedicated to an empire that predates Freemasonry by thousands of years." And he like snapped to attention when I said that, like, holy shit, how does this guy know that? Because probably nobody else he's probably ever talked to ever put that connection together. Why would you have a room in a fucking Masonic lodge dedicated to a civilization that existed when Freemasonry wasn't fucking around? Well, I know the answer to that, but your average person isn't. Again, that goes back to Anunnaki stuff, Babylonian, that what we talked about earlier, these mystery religions even predating, because before it was called Freemasonry, it was called, the Pythagorean mystery schools or Babylonian mystery religions, whatever. Who knows what it was called in other realms and planets. But either way, that was my thing. I was like, damn, I really want to see that. And he was like, "Why are you so fascinated?" I was like, "I got to know why Masons would have a whole room." And when I said that, man, it was like, he turned over and looked at the secretary and he said, "Stacy, will you hand me those keys to the Assyrian room, please?" He's like, these folks came all the way from Dallas to see this, and I don't want them to go home disappointed. And she goes, "Well, here you go." And he fucking took us in there and let me see it off the tour. And it was astounding because it had all, the stuff you see, all the type of stuff you see that's from the classic, Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, Assyrian, that whole empire, with the Nurgle looking, Anunnaki, half man, half beast, had all that stuff in there. And it was kind of, stuff was covered with tape and tarps because they were repainting and remodeling. So I'd be interested to see what it looks like now. But that was the thing that really got him. He kept saying it to me. You're not a Mason, huh? You're not a Mason, man. You should be. You should be. And I was fascinated to find out this guy, he was a 32nd degree Freemason on the Scottish Rite. And I think it's 16 or 17 degrees. I think is the highest for York Rite. But he said that Guthrie Lodge is the only lodge in the world you can go to. And you can actually go there and go through every degree in the span of like a weekend of both rites, of York Rite or Scottish Rite. He went through both, which I had only ever thought you could only go through one or the other. And he's like, no, you can go through them all. So as I'm getting ready to leave, I'm getting ready to walk out and saying bye. Thank you for your time. And we're, shaking hands or whatever. And my sister shakes his hand. I'm going to shake his hand. And as I shake his hand, I go to shake his hand, and he puts the grip on me. The Masonic grip, the fucking lock, the grip. And I knew it as soon as he just shook my hand because I could feel it. And I looked down and I saw it. And I was like, I was kind of taken aback, shaking his hand. And I just kind of looked up to smile at him as I'm shaking his hand, like you do in a normal exchange. I said, well, thank you very much, sir. And I look at him. He's not saying anything. I look at him. He's looking at me. It's crazy. He's looking at me dead in the eye. He wasn't a creepy guy. I'm shaking his hand, looking dead in his eye. He looks at me dead in the eye. And as he's looking me dead in the eye, I hear his voice as it sounded as he was talking to me. I hear his voice. I've never had any other thing like this, so forgive me for trying to explain this, and I forgive you if you don't believe me, but I'm telling you, honest to God truth. I heard his voice in my head say, join us. And that's when I realized that's what that's what those grips are. And why you see high-level people doing these grips together, it's a way they can communicate and can confer information to each other without the exchange and use of the spoken word, which I think is what Pythagoras' goal probably was and why he wouldn't allow people to speak during a probationary period going through the different levels. This ability to be able to translate information through telepathically from one person to the other without having to speak it out loud. And this, of course, is why you had these the MK Ultra and the mind control interest in remote viewing, Scientology, and the rest of it, and this idea of as you ascend up these ranks of Scientology, that you become eventually this psychic human. So I'm going to read this thing with Alex Jones talking about him and Trump being able to read each other's minds and finish each other's sentences. So it's a transcript, so I'm going to have to read this as Jones. I have no other choice. They've got all these articles where they say this, and then they say, oh, but no one wants to get rid of Trump. It's a conspiracy theory. He's mentally ill, and then they give Donald Trump his medication. He's a spoiled brat throwing fits. Meanwhile, they're running around burning things down, killing people, attacking people, throwing fits, and saying things about Trump who just has inhuman stamina at 70, folks. I mean, let me tell you something. Trump's a weird mix of classic bravado, virile nature, but also OCD. I talk to people that know him. He loves reading a complex contract. He loves making hundreds of phone calls. He loves working 20 hours a day, and they call that mentally ill. I call that super male. And compared to most guys, I'm super male, which I'm not proud of, but I'm kind of a weak guy. Trump at 70 completely trumps what I'm able to do. They want me to read contracts around here and make business calls, and which I have to do every day after the show. I'm like, I've got to learn to be like Trump. He takes each one like, oh, yeah, let me enjoy this call and make sure I have the very best on the phone and sound just like I have perfect diction and have all the answers. You talk to Trump, it sounds like you're talking to a Hollywood movie star. It's like, hello, Alex. Well, that's good. Let's discuss this. Oh, yes. You talk to Trump, he has every number, every fact. He comes right back with the answer. He finishes your sentence. It's like, is this even real? You know what? Trump is the greatest thing we've ever seen, or he's the devil. I've said that before because talking off air to Trump, which I've done some, they make a big deal out of it, so I won't even tempt the media with it. I'm sitting there talking to Trump, and it's annoying because it's so creepy. It's like, cool, he finishes your sentences, and then you're about to ask a question, and he goes, and now you're going to ask me this. And you're like, how the hell did he just do that? Let me just give everybody a news flash. The Trump you see on TV is the dumbed down Trump for the general population. The real Donald Trump is even scarier, and that's why they're so scared of him. Because I've talked to a lot of people. I've been around a lot of billionaires. I've been around a lot of smart people. And maybe he turns it up when he talks to me, but let me tell you, I talk to Donald Trump. This guy's reading my mind. Maybe he's a bad thing. My gut tells me he's not. But Donald Trump's a whole nother ballgame, whole nother enchilada. He actually says enchilada there at the end. Maybe he turns it up when he talks to me, but let me tell you, when I talk to Donald Trump, the guy is reading my mind. I mean, that whole exchange there, and he references enchiladas, references sitting in the room with billionaires, huh, Jones? Could you imagine? I can't even fucking imagine. I mean, there's the balls on that guy. Can you imagine if I went and told you that I was going and hanging out with fucking billionaires every week, and then got up here and said, "Oh yeah, but I will hang out with billionaires, but donate and buy my movies." I mean, give me a fucking break, dude. This guy was making $250,000 a week. Alex Jones, this is no bullshit. One of Alex Jones's former producers I was friends with for a long time. He was in the fold with Jones for a very long time. Experienced a lot of stuff. He later got fired by Jones. He told me that this is 10 years ago, folks, as of 2007, Jones was bringing in $250,000 per week from sponsors and advertisers alone. Now, what do you think it's ballooned to over the last 10 years? So that whole exchange where he's talking about, the whole thing of acting like, oh, I talked to Trump, away from the media, don't secret to the media and don't tell anybody about it. And the whole time he's reading my mind. He says what I'm going to say next. So again, more information and more of the sort of the stuff that people just don't see that proves what these guys are up to. Now I've got more on this with Jim Mars. Now, I was contacted by a guy. I haven't had a chance to get back to him. I've been too busy. I had a gentleman contact me about a month or so ago that said that he watched my film, The Spellcasters, and that he enjoyed it. He liked it, and said that he had Jim Mars on his show, on his radio show. He wants to have me on too. And that he asked he asked Jim Mars about his connections to Scientology. And boy, oh boy, I tell you what, there's a transcript of the interview. I think there's also the audio of the interview. You can just go type Jim Mars is not a Scientologist. That's the name of this article, published on February 14th. So exactly a month. I was right on about that timing. And the gentleman who did this interview said that he totally caught Jim off guard. He was totally not expecting it. But this is a great example of what I've been talking about, why the idea that the free zoners, that information needs to get out there on a larger scale is so important. Because Jim Mars is essentially one of these guys who is skirting around this stuff with the free zoner thing. Anyway, I'm not going to go through and read all this for the sake of time. There's a few quotes in here from Jim Mars that just really just made me lose it. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, I want to give this guy props who conducted this interview, because he absolutely 100% beyond any shadow of a doubt, not only did he get Jim Mars, I really got to give it up to this guy. Fantastic piece of work here, really. God damn. Not only did he get Jim Mars to show his absolute cards, and beyond any shadow of a doubt, confirm what we already know about him being connected to Scientology and stuff. He not only confirms it, but he also adds insult to injury. And this is what so many of these, I've found so many of these phony researchers, when you call them out on stuff, their responses always end up being summed up by pretty much by, you know what? It's just they prey on people's idiocy, and they're so arrogant they don't realize that people have now caught up. People know a lot more about the minutia of these topics now than they did 10, 15, 20 years ago, when it was easy to get away with this kind of stuff. But the one thing I noticed that Jim Mars does through here is he never once says anything bad about Scientology. In fact, multiple times tries to downplay And anytime he says anything about them doing anything bad, his response is, well, the Catholics do bad stuff and they molest people. Wait a minute. That's your thing? Instead of just let's have an open dialogue about the bad stuff they've done, your response is, well, the Catholics have molested people? Hey, I swear there's like 3 times in the interview where Mars does that. And he basically acts like any bad information or any bad things that Scientology has ever done can all be chalked up, well, there's bad people and everything and this, that, and the other. He'll never comment or talk about any of the bad stuff that's happened, even going so far as to say, and I quote, let me find it because it's gold. This is just, hold on a second. Let me scroll through here. Bear with me. Here it is. He says, and I quote from Jim Mars, the people I've met and dealt with within Scientology have always been wonderful people, and they act in a very positive and Christian-like manner. So you see what I'm saying? He is. That's what these shills and these phonies always do, folks. Even though you might be educated and have evidence in spades, they will always try to downplay it and be, well, they always act a very positive and Christian-like manner. So you can go on and read this, but that's not even the goldest of the gold to me. Yes, of course, he goes on to defend, and he even this is what's so arrogant about these guys, man. The interviewer calls him out on promoting Battlefield Earth, right? Like I talk about in Spellcasters. And what is Jim's response? Jim's response is just to promote it even more. That's when you realize these people are like you're on some kind of autopilot. When they get controlled and that those thetans kick in or whatever, when they get to the OT levels, they're like on fucking autopilot. In what universe does somebody not connected to something who claims they're not connected to something? In what universe does somebody not? I mean, that would be like me. Somebody talking shit on McDonald's and me going, oh, don't give McDonald's a bad rap. They're a great company. They put a lot of smiles on people's faces through the years. What? What about all the poisoning and this? Well, yeah, but I mean, you're going to get some poison in anything. That's what Jim is saying anytime anybody says anything. But he actually goes on to say, you can actually learn a lot reading Hubbard's work. Battlefield Earth, they just issued a new edition last year, and you can get really good deals on that at Amazon. What? The guy just point blank asked you why you were shilling for Scientology, and after you say you're not a Scientologist, you then go on to promote the book even more, what he just called you on, and then shoehorn in, you can get good deals on that at Amazon.com. What? The guy did a promo in the middle of denying he's a Scientologist. What the fuck? This is how, it's just how arrogant they are. They've gotten away with this stuff for so long, folks, that they can't even factor in the fact they've been completely exposed anymore. They're just going on about their business like my work and all the information's out there exposing them just doesn't exist, because that's what good CIA operators do. They just go on about their mission and act like they're undaunted. But that's not even the goldest of the gold from this. He actually gets Jim Mars himself to admit in this interview that he participated in the actual CIA remote viewing program and actually did physical remote viewing himself. I mean, that He says it. He says, talks about because it's either true or it's not true. And if it's not true, then here's a great story about a waste of taxpayers' money by funding all these experiments and funding this work through the CIA and the Office of Naval Intelligence and on up through the work at the Stanford Research Institute out in California and all the way into forming a unit within the United States government, these psychic warriors. You know, I said, oh, what a story. But then on the other hand, if it turns out to be true, holy cow, this is an evolutionary step for mankind. And then the interviewer says, you actually tried it, didn't you? And Jim Marrs says, oh, yeah, I've done it myself. Yeah. In fact, the very first time I effort at remote viewing, I drew a floor plan for an office building that was 100% accurate, and the thing hadn't even been built yet. I was looking into the future. But then again, a year later, when I went to Albuquerque and I went to this place, I'm going, holy cow, that's kind of how I envisioned it. And they gave me the official floor plan for this place, and it was 100% accurate from what I had drawn the year before. You notice how he says it was almost like I was looking into the future, tying that back with the Jones and Trump thing. You know who else was at that event that night in Dallas in 2006 when I had that experience with Jones? Jim Marrs. He was there. Yep. He was there too. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Yeah. Again, this is what the Spellcasters work is all about. Volume 2 is going to be even more of this, but also, getting away from the Hollywood stuff into the music industry and all the connections back. We'll have more stuff on Jones and all the stuff I've talked about recently with Cash Yogi and all that stuff. Oh my God, folks. But great work to this gentleman who did this interview. And these guys, man, even when they're exposed, they still don't give it up. They just keep that's what they're trying to do. Just keep that operation rolling forward. But I'm sorry. If you still anybody that still thinks Mars has any credibility, he's absolutely. I interviewed him a couple of times, and there was one time we were talking about chemtrails on my show. This is before I knew I had any suspicion about him at all. But this was the first thing that gave me a suspicion, because even then I knew, when you hear somebody say stuff like, associating with certain people. Anyway, he said, we were talking about chemtrails on my show. And this is what, I think it was like 2008, 2009, an interview I did with Jim Marrs. And Jim says, well, I was talking to a friend of mine one time who works in high-level black ops for the Defense Department. And he tells me this, that, and the other. And just as he's speaking, I'm sitting there going, man, really? I remember thinking, because I was still a big fan of Jim Marrs at the time, but I remember sitting there thinking, going, dude, there's no such thing as, my friend who works in high-level black ops. That person's either lying or they have they have a security clearance. Bottom line. And that's when I was thinking, I was like, this guy's got a fucking security clearance. And that's one of the things you find out with these operators when you listen to the way they talk, Jones and many others. You can tell which ones have a security clearance and which one doesn't. That's for sure. All right, folks, we need to raise $200 this week of our goal. So go to my website, get some downloads, make a donation, hit the donate button, get a subscription, do whatever. We have nothing left in the kitty right now after paying our bills, and we're going to have some cash in here to continue. Folks, nobody's doing what I'm doing, and nobody's ever going to be doing it on the level I'm doing. If you want to defeat these clowns and expose all levels of this left, right, center, and get to the real bottom of the truth, you got to help me out. And we're here, been here for 10 years. We got so many big things planned, but none of it's possible without your help. TheGlobalReality.com is my website. We'll see you next time. Take care.